What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Legion Season 2, Episode 10, Chapter 18. So, ultimately, this is a lot of build up toward the climax, but we do get some very interesting revelations in this one, and not necessarily everything, but some things are getting explained a little bit more. First of all, I really like what they did with Farouk. I kind of wondered what exactly was his goal in all of this? Like, what was his plan? And ultimately, it's almost it's interesting because I kind of look at it and it's kind of whenever you do time travel in any sort of show, there's always going to be questions of how do you handle it. And it's different almost every time. No, I don't think most things handle it the same way. So in this case, we're looking at it from the eyes of future Sid, and it's almost kind of like, okay, well, we need to change that because clearly that didn't work because the world ends up in apocalypse. But what's kind of interesting is I'm almost wondering if this future Sid is actually from the current timeline. And even though she thinks David is responsible, it's only because Farouk convinced her that David was a monster, like we saw in this episode. And then maybe Farouk does end up ruling the world, but she blames David for all of it, and so she thinks it's his fault when in reality, Farouk is the one that did all of that. I almost kind of wondered if Farouk was going to take over her body, and the future Sid that we've been talking to has really been Farouk inside of her body type of thing. I don't think that's going to end up being the case, but it is kind of interesting to see, like, maybe this is why this future Sid thinks that David is responsible, because Farouk convinced her inside of Melanie's body that he's the monster that David is. So I like how they handled that, and it was kind of an interesting little twist to see. We see David torturing Oliver, and I mean, I think most people were probably assuming, oh yeah, that's obviously Oliver, but Farouk is inside of his body. But then to find out that Farouk has already left Oliver's body and is now in Melanie and is talking to Sid and convincing her David is a monster while she's showing all of this to Sid and like, look, he's torturing Oliver. It is kind of interesting. It's a nice little twist, and I was sort of sitting here thinking like, why Melanie? Like, I don't really get it. Like, are you just so easily convinced? But then to find out that it's actually Farouk inside of her, I was like, oh, okay, so that's pretty interesting. Like, the little clues. Like, she's not really talking like herself, and yeah, a lot of people, myself included, probably just said, oh, well, it's because she's just weird and crazy this season. But then to find out it's not actually her, I like that. It doesn't sound like I thought for a second that Oliver had been killed, which does kind of something that popped into my head during this episode was the whole conversation that Oliver had with Farouk, telling him that he was going to kill him and that he had found out his weakness. I don't know if they're going to pay that off or not. Like, it seems less and less like that's going to happen, but who knows? Maybe it still will. And especially after it looked like David had killed Oliver, I was like, well, how's he going to pay it off now? But then Carrie shows up and he's like, I don't think he's dead. I think he's going to be okay. So, okay. Don't really know how. Like, he looks very dead, but sure, if you say so. So, I'll be curious to see if Oliver actually does have a plan or if that was just him grandstanding, trying to make Farouk scared. I don't know. I hope there is some sort of explanation as to what he was talking about, what he was alluding to. But we do see David's plan start to come into effect a little bit more. A couple things that do still need explained, though. So we saw, I actually looked up the guy's name, Clark. Clark is the guy with the burn face. He still shows up with I forget what they call it now. The choke, I think it was called. But it's basically, it's almost like a tuner? A tuner, is that what it's called? Like one of those things, like you hit it to get the tune. It's one of those, but it's actually, when you hit it, it takes away the abilities of mutants. So that was part of David's plan, was to do that, and I guess render Farouk powerless so that he could kill him during that time. But the weird thing about it is, last time we saw Clark, he was getting knocked over the head by Melanie and dragged away somewhere. So did that just, it made him late, or like what exactly happened there? Because it feels like him getting knocked unconscious should have ruined that part of David's plan, but it still happened anyway. But then Farouk finds his body and then gets rid of the choke anyway. So I'm like, okay, I'm confused. What did any of that have to do with what's going on? Like, how did he still get to it even though he was knocked out? And I assume Melanie like put him somewhere where he couldn't get out of, but then he's still there anyway. So did she not? Like, why knock him out? Why drag him away? Why do any of that? I'm still a little confused by that. Um, and then on top of that, there are a few other things that just I don't know. Maybe we're just supposed to assume that Farouk is controlling those guys with the safes on their head that then climb out of the hole and then start. They have these things that when they spin them, they create like this high pitched noise that cause people to basically. I mean, it was ringing very loud, and then guys started throwing up and then keeled over, and only Carrie could stand up to it, and she kicks all their asses. But then more guys crawl out of the hole, and then there's Lenny, and she kills some of them, but then they still drag the guy Carrie into the hole, and then the Minotaur shows up out of nowhere. I don't know why there's a Minotaur, but he shows up and he kills one of those guys for some reason. I don't know. I really don't. Like that. Maybe it was explained. Maybe earlier this season they were talking about Farouk and like some of his legion that he controls. I don't know. I don't know, but yeah, that all seemed sort of out there and weird and didn't really connect to anything. It just sort of happened. Aside from that, though, I think the most interesting stuff right now is just going to be the stuff with Sid and stuff with David. You know, David, we can see he does seem like he's been driven mad by Farouk, which makes sense. I mean, a lot of what he went through, I do agree, you know, that probably did drive him to the edge of insanity. But on the flip side, Farouk is the one saying all this, and Farouk knows he's the one that did all of this to make him insane. So it's kind of an interesting topic. Like, does Farouk say all this knowing that he is going to become the bad guy ultimately, or is Farouk saying all this to try to twist Sid and make her turn against David because he knows he's gonna win and he's gonna be the victorious one and he's gonna beat David? So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting thing just watching David as well come to the realization after he's almost killed Oliver and he's talking to Carrie, like he even realizes, he's like, what scares me the most is how good it felt, you know, to think about all these ways I'm gonna remove this parasite, like kill this parasite that's been within me. So it's almost like he does have that sense of humanity still within him. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see what they decide to do with it in the end, because there is one more season after this, and I'm pretty sure it's the last season. So are they going to turn it into David is the bad guy for the final season and it's about stopping the most powerful mutant ever? Or is it something where Farouk... Like, I'm curious to find out if Farouk's even going to be involved. Like, it does feel like this is setting up to be the final showdown between the two. Because last season, that's what it felt like as well. It felt like it was building up to David and the devil with the yellow eyes, like, combating that demon inside of him. And then ultimately it led to Farouk getting expelled from his body and into Oliver. And that's a lot of what this season has been, is just Farouk making his moves, them trying to work within Division 3 and also the future Sid storyline. And it feels like it has been building up to this moment where Farouk finds his body. You know, are they going to be able to stop him? Or is stopping him going to create a new villain? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of different possibilities that they could take with this, and I am curious to see. I'm also hoping that in this final episode, at least make some sort of reference to that one episode where we saw the alternate timelines and multiple universe things, because if not, then that literally, like I said, that episode literally had nothing to do with the rest of the season. It was just there just to show us what else could have happened. But if they have something that at least references it, or, you know, even if you have just a little throwaway line where it's like, you know, just imagine if he had used these powers and became super rich and powerful, like he would have just ruled over the world and not cared about the little people. Like, I don't know, just something to let me know, hey, this is why we showed you that episode, because there's really no other reason that I've seen so far this season. Again, it didn't really tie into Amy a little bit, but not really. Like, there's nothing that, when I watch that episode, by the end of it, I'm thinking, oh, see, so him losing Amy, this shows, like, why this episode happened, dealing with the loss of Amy. I didn't get any of that. I just saw they wanted to show what could have happened with David, and that's it. And it didn't really connect to the rest of the main story. So, anyways, that's how I feel about all of that. Now, on to the final episode. See you there. And finally, episode 11, chapter 19, the season finale. And a lot of very interesting questions raised in this one. And honestly, it sets up for a very exciting and intriguing season 3 as well. So, first of all, the opening is definitely something I gotta talk about because it's so good. I mean, just Behind Blue Eyes playing very solemnly while they're singing it, and the animation on the two of them fighting. It was just brilliant way to start the episode. So I had a lot of fun watching that. But then we do see David stops him. Sid is fully convinced that David is the problem that she needs to solve, that she needs to get rid of because he's too dangerous. And this is where a lot of the questions do get raised because ultimately we did see this future Sid telling Farouk that David destroys the world, so that's why she needs Farouk to stop him. Well, we see in this timeline, Farouk doesn't die. He does get his body back. They're going to actually put him on trial, but then of course it switches around because they start to see what David's been doing. But so I guess I'm kind of interested to see what's going to happen because apparently this future Sid in her timeline, David does kill Farouk, and then somehow he turns and destroys the world. But what's weird about that is that it's almost kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy in this one where this current present Sid sees all of this that Farouk has showed her, and so she convinces herself that he is a bad person and then tries to kill him, and in doing so, that is kind of what turns him. So I'm wondering what it was that turned him in the other timeline. What made him become a terrible person, somebody who sees himself as a god and basically destroys everything. What turned him in that timeline? Because in this one, we can clearly see it was the effects of the other timeline, and maybe it's something that's just meant to happen. So he's always going to turn no matter what in every timeline. So I don't know. I'm kind of confused. I'm curious to see what they're gonna do with that because even they showed the multiple timeline thing that one episode, and again it's still not really coming to play, so I'm still gonna stand by my original assessment, which is kind of a waste of time. But even in that one, like, it's not like he always turned evil. Like when he was homeless, it's not like he was evil. He just didn't want to be bothered, and then whenever people did bother him is whenever he ended up killing them. He did turn evil in the one where he got all the power, but you combine somebody with that much power, like superpower, and then you give him a ton of money, yeah, that combination normally doesn't work well. Like in the case of, Bruce Wayne, it worked out, but that's just because of what happened to his parents and he had to experience that. And it had the potential to turn him into a dark and disturbed person, but it didn't. He rose above that. So that's kind of one of the great things about Batman. Whereas with David here, he was treated so wrongly all his life, and people looked at him like he was different. And so yeah, that one moment whenever he finally manages to rise up above it and he starts using his powers and then he gets a bunch of wealth because of it, that type of David I could see turning evil, especially if Farouk is working with him still. And that's kind of where I'm curious to see how much of this is what's going on right now is still Farouk's doing, because obviously David does have that potential, and we've seen that, but also a lot of it came from Farouk torturing him when he was younger, but now Farouk seems like, no, I want to help you, David. So I don't know, like, it's very interesting because there are so many possibilities, and now of course with season 3 setting up to look like it's essentially going to be them trying to stop David, because all of this, people constantly just turning against him now from his point of view. But at the same time, a lot of this just comes from the fact that Sid shows up as he's about to kill Farouk and then tries to shoot him. So you could say that that is kind of what started this little shift. Because we did see there are other moments where he was talking to this other version of himself, but that moment seemed to really flick the switch and turn him into a bit more of a disturbed person, where now he's erasing Sid's mind so she can't remember anything that happened, and then he's like essentially, forcing himself on her. Um, so I don't know. I'll be very curious to see how much of what's going on with David right now is still Farouk's doing. It's still Farouk pulling the strings from the background, trying to make David look like he is this evil person. Um, or it could ultimately all just be that everything that David's been through has just turned him into this person and there isn't redemption for him. I feel like that's a little bit more of a hopeless message. Like, I don't know. It's one of those mixed bag things because it would be interesting and something I've not really seen before where there is no redemption for David. He wants to be a good person, but there's just too much pulling against him to keep him from becoming that. So ultimately, the best solution is just to get rid of him. Like, it's a bit of a dark message, but also it would be very unique. So I could see them doing it because the show is dark and unique. But overall, like a lot of this episode, there was kind of a after that opening scene, it was a little bit slower. You just see David trying to be like, yeah, everything's okay. Wipe Sid's mind. I'm gonna get her to remember that she loves me, but he doesn't really understand the concept of love, I think. And then ultimately, you see Carrie figuring out what he did. You see, what's his name, Fuyuhama, the admiral. Can't remember his name right now. It's something like that though. But you see him seeing what David is doing as well, and so ultimately it does lead to that moment where he thinks that it's going to be Farouk on trial, but it's actually him on trial. And then because that happens, he kind of just gives in and says, you know what, screw it. Like if you guys aren't going to trust me, then whatever. And again, how much of that is that's just who he is deep down, and how much of it is this is Farouk pulling the strings and making this stuff happen and turning him into that person and convincing everybody else that he is that person as well. Because, I mean, it's kind of a self fulfilling prophecy. So, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I don't know if I'm just thinking too hard about it. Maybe I just need to accept the fact that no, this is what the show wants to do. They just want to turn David into the bad guy. And that's going to be season 3. But I would like to think that there's a bit more going on here than meets the eye. Like, again, there are several things that didn't really get paid off by the end of it. First of all, again, with Oliver, it seemed like he had a plan to stop Farouk, and none of that came to fruition. Have no idea what happened to Melanie and Oliver. They had like a video of them 3 years later, and they're like shooting some video talking about being together and our bodies are hidden somewhere, but shame what happened to Sid, and basically kind of foreshadowing the bad things to come. But no idea what happened to the two of them. Autonomy is still within the mainframe inside of Admiral's head, so don't know what's going on with him. Um, Again, the multiple timelines that we saw in the one episode, still have no idea what that was supposed to be, or if it's even gonna happen, or anything's gonna happen with that. So yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that I feel like it's setting up for something else, but then of course it could have just been throwaway scenes that they could either decide to do something with it or not. Ooh, excuse me. So I'm kind of hoping, because this show seems clever enough, I'm hoping that they are setting up something kind of twisty, a little bit interesting, because I would like to see that. I would like to see them do something more interesting with this story than just saying, oh, well, David, he's been through a lot, so now he's the bad guy. Like, yeah, it is kind of interesting to see who you thought was the main character, the hero, ultimately becomes evil and just sort of says, hey, I'm so powerful, like, whatever, I can do whatever I want. But also, like, I don't know, I would prefer to see that this is all somehow part of the plan that Farouk has to make things happen this way so that he seems like the good guy in all of it. Because I don't know, it doesn't feel like this is what it's been building up to. Like the past few episodes, it's definitely been showing that. Ever since we saw Sid talking about David as the one that destroyed the world, these past few episodes have been building toward that, toward David being the bad guy. But the first season and even part of this second season, like I didn't get that sense at all. I didn't get the sense that it was building towards David being the bad guy. It felt more like, David was trying to stop Farouk, and Farouk just constantly torturing him and messing with him and basically getting rid of anything he loved. So I don't know. It's again, they could just be playing with expectations, but also there's a part of me that wants it to be a bit more clever than just as straightforward as it seems right now. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, overall, season 2. Obviously, I don't really remember the first 3 episodes as well because it's been so long since I watched it. But this season was pretty interesting. There were definitely some more moments of just sort of nonsense, and it felt like, especially that one episode, it just felt like there were some things that didn't contribute to the overall plot. It just kind of filler and things to, oh, let's show this. That's kind of interesting looking. Oh, that's kind of quirky, and I think I've come to expect a little bit more out of shows like than just to be quirky for quirkiness sake. I want that quirkiness to somehow play into everything. And there are a few things that this season I just felt like didn't. Overall, I still enjoyed it. I still think, I'm still very interested to see what's going to happen. But I do feel like there were a couple times this season where it got a little sidetracked. So I'll definitely be curious to see what season 3 holds. I'll probably try to watch season 3 sooner rather than later. I know I've got a lot of shows to get caught up on. But I do want to watch the next season while this season is still fresh in my mind, just so I don't wait several months and then like, okay, wait, what happened again? I forgot. But with that being said, I just as far as what's to come, I will have a little bit of time in the next week or so to watch some shows again. So hopefully, try to watch a few seasons of something that won't take too long. Like, I'm not going to start on the CW shows probably until I have plenty of time where I don't have to worry about stopping halfway through. And I've got like 4 shows to watch for the CW. So that's going to take a while. So I'm probably going to stick to something a bit more like solo, like something from CBS, like NCIS or Criminal Minds or Bull, maybe Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I do kind of want to hold off on The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead until I have a bit more time to process. So I might be able to watch Legion this next week or so if I have time. We'll see what happens. But yeah, overall, I'm excited. Hopefully you guys are, excited to watch my videos if you're even watching this. I've been getting like hardly any views, but that's what happens whenever you go from uploading a lot and then you don't upload anything for months and months and you don't edit anything. Like, nobody's interested. It is what it is. But anyways, with all that being said, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts in this episode and the season as a whole? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe. Future Fargo. Why do I say Fargo? Like, I'm stuck on FX, I think. And I don't know why. Like, I didn't even talk about watching Fargo, but I think I thought it, and so Fargo just came out. Let me know if you want to see more Legion. Legion. Whew. Yeah. It's embarrassing how my brain works sometimes. Anyways, talk to you later. Peace.